This video is brought to you by the Clark Clan Ironworks engineering firm. With an industry's leading rate of 75% of our buildings still standing upon completion.
Hey gang, and welcome back. Just so you know, you can use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, one word, at flipsidegaming.com to get 10% off orders $10 or more. You can also use the promo code at Original Magic Art on everything except for paintings. And finally, you can use the code at mtg.multizone.ca to get 10% off of your orders of singles. Using the code will help you save some money and help out the channel at the same time. Just to let you know, Flipside Gaming is going to be giving away a full set of Commander 2019 when it releases to one lucky winner. The contest will be running from July 12th until August 26th, and all you have to do to enter is either use my promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, no spaces, on an order of over $10 or more, or you can send a stamped, self-addressed envelope or postcard to Flipside Gaming. It's one entry per person, so good luck, have fun, and I hope you win. So before we get into today's game, I want to wish Nick a happy belated birthday. Also, if your name happens to be Nick and you had a recent birthday, happy birthday to you as well. Today's game features some of my favorite players in the entire world, the Jersey Boys. And Tal is back with a brand new brew, and he's playing Yarok, keeping 2 islands, Frontier Siege, Spring, Wilderness Reclamation, and Woodland Cemetery. Trevor is bringing his dynamic duo of Vial Smasher and Ikra, keeping a Blood Crypt, Command Tower, Harmonize, Verdant Catacombs, and Lightning Greaves. Ryan is playing his Hapatra deck, and he keeps a Forest, a Hissing Quagmire, a Llanowar Wastes, a Blooming Marsh, a Putrefy, Generous Patron, and Hex Parasite. And last but not least, Matt is playing his Teysa Karlov deck. He keeps a Swamp, a Tainted Field, a Myriad Landscape, Swiftfoot Boots, Smothering Tithe, Smothering Abomination, and Ashnod's Altar. Ryan wins the die roll and starts us off. Ryan plays a Blooming Marsh, and he casts Hex Parasite, passing to Trevor. Trevor plays a tapped Blood Crypt, passing. Tal plays an Evolving Wilds, and cracks it while passing to Matt. Matt plays a tapped Myriad Landscape, and we go to Ryan's turn. Ryan plays a Forest and brings out Hapatra. The benefits of a 2-drop commander. He then heads to combat, swinging the Parasite at Matt for 1. Trevor plays his Command Tower, and he casts Lightning Greaves before passing to Tal. Tal plays a tapped Dimir Guildgate before passing. Matt drops a Swamp and casts his Swiftfoot Boots. Ryan plays a tapped Hissing Quagmire, and he casts a Priest of Forgotten Gods in his main phase. Heading to combat, the Hex Parasite finds its way once more at Matt, while Hapatra hits Tal for 2. Ryan uses Hapatra's trigger to put a -1/-1 counter on the newly cast Priest, gaining a Snake token and passing turn. Trevor plays his Verdant Catacomb, cracking it and taking 1. He shortcuts quickly, casting Vial Smasher and giving her the Greaves before finding his land and passing without attacking. Tal plays a Woodland Cemetery and casts Spring. This lets him find another Swamp, and he passes to Matt. Matt plays his Tainted Field and drops a Flesh Carver onto the field, and has to pass to Ryan. Ryan plays his Llanowar Wastes and heads to combat. Hapatra goes at Tal again, while the Parasite and Snake head towards Trevor. Both of them declare no blocks, and before damage is dealt, Ryan casts Putrefy to blow up Trevor's Greaves. He then pays 1 and activates the Hex Parasite by paying 1 mana into the X and 2 life. This pumps the Parasite by +1/+0 and removes the -1/-1 counter from the Priest. They both then take the hit, and Ryan puts his counter on Vial Smasher, gaining another Snake, and he passes turn. Trevor casts Read the Bones in his main phase, rolling for Vial Smasher's trigger. We learn Vial Smasher is still mad at Ryan though for making her look weak at the table, and before taking the damage, Ryan activates his Priest to sacrifice 2 snakes. This forces his opponents to sacrifice a creature and lose 2 life, while Ryan gains 2 black mana and draws a card. With Matt losing the Carver, he gains a Horror token with power and toughness equal to the Flesh Carver's power. Ryan then takes the damage, and Trevor then loses 2 life and scries 2 cards. He keeps 1 on top and bottoms 1, and then draws 2. We then see a mountain, and he passes to Tal. Tal plays an island and drops Frontier Siege, naming cons. Matt is missing those lovely lands, and he swings his Horror at Ryan for 2, and then passes. Ryan drops a Forest and casts an Ancient Cravings, drawing 3 cards at the cost of 3 life. Heading to combat, Hapatra and the Parasite go at Trevor for 3. Hapatra then triggers when she connects, putting a counter on the Horror and giving Ryan another snake. In his second main phase, Ryan activates his Priest again, sacrificing the Snake and the Hex Parasite, and this forces his opponents to each sacrifice a creature if they have one, and lose 2 life, while Ryan gains 2 black mana and draws a card. Ryan uses this mana and a green source for a Rot Wolf before passing to Trevor. Trevor draws, and Matt cracks his landscape to find 2 basics. Trevor then pays 4 for Harmonize, drawing 3 cards with a crisp snap as each hits his hand. He then plays a Tap Sheltered Thicket before passing. Tal gains 2 green mana in his main phase from his Siege trigger, and plays another island. He brings out his Commander, and passes through his main phases and combat step, gaining 2 more green in his post-combat main phase. He uses his mana to drop a Doomwake Giant, and as the Giant enters, Tal gets 2 of its Enter the Battlefield triggers, giving all of his opponents' creatures -2/-2. This effectively wipes Ryan's board, and Tal passes to Matt. Matt plays a High Market, and pays for Smothering Tithe. He passes. Matt asks if Ryan pays the 2, which he doesn't, and Ryan plays a Swamp for his land for turn, and we then see a Hand of the Praetors jumping out of Ryan's hand, and he passes. Trevor pays for the Tithe trigger as he draws, and he plays a Reliquary Tower, and then casts Farseek and Rampant Growth, searching at the same time and passing to Tal. Tal pays for the Tithe as well, and he gains his mana from the Siege in his main phase. He also plays a Reliquary Tower as well, before casting Meletis Astronomer. And yes, you heard that correctly. Heading to combat, Tal swings a Doomwake at Matt for 4, and Yarok at Trevor for 3. With his commander connecting, Tal gains 3 life. In Tal's second main phase, he gains 2 more green, which helps him cast Wilderness Reclamation. This triggers the Doomwake Giant twice again. Tal then passes, untapping his lands at his end step. Matt plays a Temple of Silence, scrying 1. He bottoms the card, and then drops a Mentor of the Meek, and equips it with the boots before passing to Ryan. Ryan draws, and Matt gains a treasure. Ryan then plays a Karn's Bastion before tapping out for Black Sun Zenith, where X is 5. With the spell in the stack, Tal responds to it when he gains priority, and flashes an Eel Umbra on Yarok. This will let his commander live through the board wipe, and also has the added benefit of wiping out Matt's creatures with the Doomwake triggers. Ryan then passes to Trevor. Trevor draws and decides to pay for the Tithe trigger. He plays a Game Troll as his land for turn, and he casts Phyrexian Arena. Tal pays the 2 for Matt's Tithe again, and plays a Forest with 2 green floating from his Siege trigger. He then casts the Aftermath card, Mind, drawing 2 cards. And he pays for one of the Tithe triggers, and Matt gains a treasure for the second. Tal then passes, untapping his lands at the end of turn. Matt plays a Swamp and pays 3 for National's Altar. He then brings out his commander, Teysa Karlov, and uses a treasure to put the boots onto her. Ryan draws and gives Matt a treasure. He plays Temple of Malady, scrying 1 and bottoming the card. He then drops a Generous Patron, choosing not to put the support counters on anything. He then casts a Contagion Clasp, which puts a counter on the Doomwake Giant as it enters, drawing him a card from the Patron and killing it. Ryan then finishes off with a Planar Void, which he'd just drawn, and he passes to Trevor. Trevor loses 1 life drawn from the arena, and then for turn. He doesn't pay for either draws, and Matt gains some more treasure tokens. Smoldering Marsh then hits the field, and Trevor casts Seasons Past. He returns to hand the Verdant Catacombs, Farseek, Read the Bones, and Harmonize, before putting the past on the bottom. He then casts Harmonize again, which gets exiled from the Planar Void, and draws 3 cards with Matt gaining 3 treasures. At the end of Trevor's turn, Tal flashes in Dictate of Karametra. Tal draws and lets Matt get his treasure. We see Tal gaining 2 green mana from his Siege trigger, and he taps 2 lands for the rest of the mana needed to cast Casualties of War. He picks the Clasp for an artifact, the Patron for a creature, Smothering Tithe for the enchantment, and Karn's Bastion for his land. He then casts a primal command, putting Ryan's planar void on top of his library, and gets to search for a creature card. He finds Eternal Witness, putting it to hand. Witness then joins the party, with Yarok doubling the enter the battlefield triggers, and this lets Tal bring back the command and the Doom-like Giant. Tal then moves through combat, gaining more mana in his second main phase from the siege. He uses it to cast the command again, and shuffles Ryan's graveyard into his library, and searches for another creature from his library. He finds Clever Impersonator, putting it to hand, and then untaps his lands at the end of turn. Matt draws and plays an Urborg, fixing that issue he was having with no black mana. Oh wait. He casts a Smothering Abomination, staying on theme with Smothering cards, and then a Harvester of Souls. Matt then uses some of his treasures for a Blood Artist, and he puts the boots onto it. Ryan gets to tap only 2 lands again for Hapatra thanks to Tal's Dictate. Following up with the Midnight Banshee. She won't actually do all that much currently, but Ryan plays a Bojuka Bog and exiles Tal's graveyard. Trevor loses 1 to the arena, drawing for it and for his turn. His deck is certainly happy about the double mana from the Dictate, and he casts Tormenting Voice, discarding a land and drawing 2. He then recasts the Read the Bones, scrying 2, keeping 1 on top and bottoming the other, then draws 2 and loses 2. Bane of Progress then hits the stack, and Matt responds to the spell. He sacrifices the Smothering Abomination, drawing 3 cards as the Harvester's trigger is doubled. Matt also puts the 2 Blood Artist triggers targeting Trevor, who uses this as a chance to float the double mana he'd get before getting drained for 2. The Bane then resolves and wipes away all artifacts and enchantments. Trevor then casts Disrupt Decorum, goading his opponents, and he then plays a Yavimaya Hollow and casts Farseek and then a Siphon Mind. He finds his land first while everyone discards a card and then draws 3. For 3 mana, Tal casts Thas in his main phase, and Trevor illustrates to onlookers just how effective his Bane of Progress was. Tal then casts a Clever Impersonator, who comes in and becomes a copy of the Witness. He puts Frontier Sage back into his hand and heads to combat. He can't swing the Witness at Trevor, so he heads at Ryan, who blocks with a Banshee. She deals damage with Wither, which means Ryan gets a Snake token, and Matt's Harvester sees it dying, drawing him 2 cards. Matt also gets 2 Blood Artist triggers, putting 1 apiece on Tal and Ryan, and with nothing else, Tal passes. Matt draws for turn and plays Anointed Procession, before heading to combat. He swings everything at Tal, who blocks the Blood Artist. Matt sacrifices it to High Market, gaining 1 life, and gets 2 drain triggers, putting them both on Trevor, and he draws 2 cards from the Harvester. In his post-combat main phase, Matt drops an Expedition map and passes. Ryan's Banshee triggers and puts a -1/-1 counter on the Bane of Progress and Eternal Witness, which gives him 2 more snakes from Hapatra. He then plays a Nurturing Peatland as his land for turn, paying 1 to sacrifice it and draw a card. Ryan then pays 3 for Maelstrom Pulse to destroy the Harvester and cut off some of Matt's draw engine. Heading to combat, Hapatra goes at Tal, while the Banshee heads at Matt. With Hapatra connecting, Ryan puts another -1/-1 counter onto the Bane, and makes another snake, and passes to Trevor. Trevor untaps and plays a Primal Amulet in his main phase, before replaying his Verdant Catacombs, and passes. Tal scries with Thassa, keeping it there and drawing it. He replays the Frontier Siege, naming Khans again, and passes to his second main phase, getting 2 more green. He uses this green to help cast Tetyova, which in turn lets him gain 2 life and draw a card as he plays a tapped Dismal Backwater for turn. He then passes, and Matt activates his maps to go and find a land. He grabs and puts to hand Cabal Coffers, which I say as if there's any other choice. Matt plays his Coffers and activates it for a lot. He plays an Ogred Slumlord with 4 black mana remaining. We then see, being a relative term because of the glare, a Falconwrath Noble floating into existence. Matt then casts a Viscera Seer, and Trevor responds. He casts a Terminate on Teysa, and holding priority, uses a fork to copy the spell. The copy targets the Noble, as Trevor adds 2 counters to his amulet. With the forked copy of Terminate on the stack, Matt flashes in Dictate of Erebos. We then resolve the copy, and with the noble dying, Matt gets a death trigger from the Ogre Slumlord, giving him 1 rat. This trigger is doubled by both of Teysa's ability and the Anointed Procession, giving him a total of 4 rats actually. He also gets 2 drain triggers from the noble, and he drains Trevor for 2. And the table then has to sacrifice a creature from the Dictate trigger seeing the noble dying, and Matt then passes. Ryan's Banshee trigger goes on the stack, and Matt realizes he should have more rats from the Dictate killing other creatures. They sort this out, and their trigger resolves, sadly hitting Ryan's own snakes, which trigger Hapatra and replace the snakes. Ryan then plays a timely Tectonic Edge, and sacrifices it to take out High Market, trying to keep Matt off the sacrifice outlets, and he passes to Trevor. Trevor plays a tap Spine Rock Knoll, tucking a card underneath the land for later use. We then see a bit of a sketchy play, with Red Elemental Blast targeting Thassa, which has Trevor basically paying 1 red to essentially add another counter to his amulet. And Trevor follows up with a Comet Storm where X is 1 because of the amulet, and does 1 damage to Matt's face to add the final counter and transform the amulet into Primal Wellspring. Matt's feeling an oncoming torrent of Hailfire, and he's almost right as Trevor taps 8 mana, one of which being the Wellspring, to cast an Exsanguinate where X is 6. He gets a copy of the spell, and resolves the copy, draining the table for 6 and gaining 18. Before letting the original spell resolve, Trevor then flashes in Dualcaster Mage, making another copy of the Exsanguinate. He resolves that copy, gaining another 18 life and draining the table for 6, before doing it again, gaining 18 more and draining the table for 6. Talon taps, scries, and bottoms the card with Thassa. He draws for turn, and gains 2 green in his main phase. He pays the 7 to recast his commander, and passes through his main phase and combat step to his second main phase to gain 2 more green. He casts Snake Umbra on Yarok this time around, with Yarok shifting into more animals this game than an Animorph novel. He then passes to Matt. Matt activates his coffers to help recast Teysa, and uses the rest of his floating mana for a Pawn of Ulamog before passing turn. Ryan's Banshee trigger goes off, killing his snakes and putting a -1/-1 counter on the Dual Mage. This gives Ryan 3 more snakes, and he casts Devoted Druid in his main phase. Trevor cycles a land I can't properly pronounce, drawing from it, and he then casts Blasphemous Act, and Tal has a response. He puts Croissant Grip onto the stack, hitting the Dictate. Before the wipe happens though, Matt sacrifices the pawn to the Viscera Seer, getting more rats and Eldrazi spawn, and scrying 1. He bottoms it, and then scries again with another spawn, bottoming that card. He then does it again, and then a 3rd time, and then finally with the last spawn, decides to keep it on top. The wipe then happens, and Matt gets a bunch more rat tokens as the board is cleared. Trevor then drops a Sakura Tribe Elder, and Kushkin falls. His land for turn is Bajuka Bog, and he exiles Matt's graveyard before passing to Tal. Tal scries 1 with Thassa and bottoms the card. He draws for turn and gains 2 green in his main phase, playing a tap Simic Guildgate. He then activates Thassa to make Yarok unblockable, and he swings his commander at Trevor, paying the 2 for the falls. Trevor then takes the hit, and Tal gains 3, and he passes. Matt activates the coffers to help cast Wormcoil Engine in his main phase, and he moves to cast Return to Dust. He gets to exile the Kushkin Falls and Thassa, and then moves to combat. Matt swings 4 rats at Trevor, with Trevor in turn blocking with the Elder, and he regenerates it with Yavimaya Hollow. Ryan cycles the Desert of the Glorified, drawing 1, and we then see a Phyrexian Swarmlord hitting the field as a decent answer to Trevor's large life total. Trevor's turn has him recasting Vial Smasher, and this time Ikra joins the party, with Trevor trying to shore up some defenses. He plays a Hissing Quagmire tapped, and with only 1 card in hand, passes to Tal. Tal draws and drops an Archetype of Imagination. This removes all of the non-existent flying from his opponent's creatures, and gives his stuff flying as well. Heading to combat, Yarok hits Trevor again for 3, gaining Tal 3 life. Matt casts Soul Ring in his main phase, and an old challenger appears. He heads to combat, swinging the Wormcoil Engine at Trevor, and Trevor snap blocks this core tribe elder, and then sacrifices it before damage is dealt. With nothing else, Matt passes. Ryan's Swarmlord triggers on his upkeep, but with no poison counters to be seen, it does nothing. He then draws a card and cycles Croson Tusker. He finds a basic, putting it to hand, and plays it as a land for turn before he draws from the cycle, and he passes turn. Trevor draws and plays a mountain. Tal draws and gains 2 green from his siege, using it to help pay for Well of Ideas. He draws 2 as it enters, which is doubled with Yarok, letting him draw 4. He then plays a Memorial to Genius as his land for turn, which comes in tapped. Trevor then gets it again for 3 with Yarok, and Tal gains 3. Moving to his second main phase, Tal gains 2 more green from the siege, and uses it to help pay for Riptide Chimera. Matt draws 2 for his turn thanks to Tal, and he swings his rats and Wormcoil at Trevor. He blocks 2 rats and takes the rest, with Matt gaining 13 life. Ryan plays a swamp for turn and realizes he should have drawn another card from Tal. He heads to combat, swinging the Swarmlord at Matt. Matt blocks the rat token and gains 1 life. Moving to his second main phase, Ryan casts Decree of Pain, and with the wipe on the stack, Trevor casts Fury Storm, putting 4 copies, the Fury Storm plus 3 copies, onto the stack above Ryan's. Trevor's copies then resolve, but not before Matt uses Swords to Plowshares on his Wormcoil engine. He does this to deny Trevor the chance to draw 8 more cards, as Teysa and the Wormcoils on death triggers, plus the Anointed Procession, would have done just that. With all of Trevor's copies resolving before Ryan's, it's a pretty sad day when Ryan resolves his Decree of Pain, and with nothing else, Ryan recasts his Hex Parasite and passes to Trevor. Trevor draws for turn, and draws 1 from Tal's Well. With a grip full of cards, he's feeling pretty good, and he casts Demonic Tutor using his Primal Wellspring, which is never a good sign for his opponents. And he finds a Rude Awakening and a Season's Past, showing the table because he's going to demonstrate his loop. Trevor casts Rude Awakening, choosing to untap his lands, and floats the rest of his mana. The Awakening then resolves, untapping his lands. And he then uses 6 to cast Seasons Past. This lets him bring back Rude Awakening and Demonic Tutor, and with his Wellspring open again, he's able to now recast the Demonic Tutor again to find any card he wants plus the Seasons Past. He then only has to recast the Rude Awakening, making a larger and larger mana pool, and he loops through this a few times until he decides to find an X spell to finish off the table. Game review time. So I think this game was played incredibly well, and I think everyone's line of plays and their reactions were pretty much on key. It seemed very much like whenever someone would pull ahead, the rest of the table would stop him, and then the game would reset basically until someone else pulled ahead again. I think by the end of it, so many people had so few cards in their hands that no matter who resolved the Decree of Pain, that person was most likely winning. Speaking of the Decree of Pain, I thought it was pretty genius that Matt used the Swords to Plowshares on his own creature. I never would have thought of that, and it really shows how well he knows the deck in and out, since if the Wormcoil had died, with the Anointed Procession and Teysa, he would have gotten a bunch more tokens, which in turn would have given Trevor more draw. Tal's continuing his tradition of building sweet and interesting decks, and I love the idea of an Enchantress-based Yarok deck. Doubling the battlefield trigger of a lot of Constellation spells is fantastic. True to form though, he did have some interesting cards like that Mellitus Astronomer, who I'm not really too sure what was going on with it, but I think he was running it in conjunction with Auras to manipulate the top deck and basically get some card draw from it. It's a shame that Ryan wasn't able to connect a few times with Infect, because I think things would have added up very quickly, and people would have been a lot more afraid of Hapatra. As it stood though, it seemed like once he started getting more of a board state after the board wipe, basically he would lose it immediately with the Banshee killing all of his snakes. It meant that he could never really effectively attack beyond using Hapatra and the Banshee, and I feel like it cut off a lot of his potential for being aggressive. Last but not least, Trevor's Vial Smasher and Ikra deck continues to prove why it's probably my favorite deck that he's ever built. It's resilient, it's adaptable, and it's a lot of fun. And it's very untraditional. Typically we see blue when it comes to spell slinging, so the fact that Trevor is forcing himself not to run the most powerful and predominant spell slinging color is just great. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.